Hey there everyone, so this is a story I didn't think I'd be making, mostly because I honestly didn't think it would happen. What am I talking about? I am talking about tabling at a 4-day con for my very first tabling ever. Yeah, it's also why I wasn't able to work on any videos for a while, because I was doing the convention grind for 3 months straight. Oh boy. I do plan on making a video talking about how I got into the con or something along those lines, as I couldn't fit this into the video, but for now, I just want to talk about how the convention went for me, because honestly, there's a lot to go into. But before we get into that, what are we drawing here? Well, I thought for the speed paint talking about the convention, why not show some of the artwork that I did for it? Not all of it will be shown, but if you do want to see all that I did for the con, you can check out my Ko-fi as it will be uploaded there. Hopefully, if I don't forget, a note for future editing Shuji. Make sure you do that. Anyway, what's it like to vendor at a 4-day con for the very first time as your first tabling experience? Let's see. As I mentioned earlier, this is a 4-day con, and I don't know if all conventions do this. I know that some do this. What I'm talking about is the day of setup. Normally, on most cons, you will have same-day setup, and some cons you will have 1 day before con setup. This con thankfully had a day setup where people were not allowed in, attendees were out, and it was only just for us vendors. So let's get into that. I'll use this day as day 0. The day of setup, I had gotten up pretty early, and I didn't realize that the time for check-in was at a later time, so I decided to sleep in a little bit more. And honestly, sleep is a blessing because for an event like this, 4 days. 4 days of con. That's a lot. I had thankfully packed up everything into the car last night, the merch box, the setup box, the hotel stuff, my sanity, possibly, who knows. It was all packed into the car last night, so we weren't in any rush to get up. Oh, and when I say we, I say that because my sister, who has more experience when it comes to selling stuff, she came to help me out with the event, and I'm very, very grateful because I am very, very shy. I've been told that I give up extrovert energy on my streams, but I am an introvert through and through. Eventually, we had gotten up, dropped off the doggo at the babysitter, and then we began to drive to the con for check-in. We attempted to get breakfast at a small food joint, but lost it by 1 minute. I don't know why, but lunch apparently begins at 10:30 in the morning. Isn't it supposed to be like for 12 o'clock for lunch? I don't know, fast food timestamps are weird, or maybe I am because I just normally eat lunch at around 12 for streaming. Oh well. Eventually, we had gone to the convention center and we were in line for the loading dock. Someone apparently thought that it was a good idea to just cut the line, knowing full well and seeing full well that there was a line to get in for the loading dock. Thankfully, they were taken out to basically go back in the line. I had asked the person at the dock if we had a time limit on how long we could stay in there, but he just said to go on in and set up. So we parked the car, unpacked, and got our badges, and walked on in to set up. While we were setting up, we began chatting with the other vendors, asking if this was their first time, and surprisingly, the row that I was in was with a lot of first-timers, at least for vending at a con. They had mentioned to me that they had vended at small fairs before, but it honestly made me feel more at ease because this was my first time vending at a con and their first time as well, so first time for everything, I guess. My stamp rally mates said they would be showing up late, so I just decided to meet them tomorrow so we could get our prizes set up then. It gave me more time to focus setting up my booth because I really wanted to make the booth look good, and with my sister's help, we did get it pretty good. Though through all of this, my phone kept on ringing and buzzing, but I was just so focused on setting up the booth that I just didn't mind it. Later though, an announcement went off in the hall, but it was really muffled so I didn't understand it. The only thing that I heard was car? I just kept on focusing on my booth. And then a staff member came up and asked us if we left our car in the dock. I told him, yeah, the people said it was okay. Then he said we had to move our car, otherwise it would be towed because we were over the time limit. What? Note, the gatekeeper said we could park and just walk in and set up. We weren't informed of a time limit, so my sister ran like a bullet to move the car before it got towed, moving it to the parking garage that was nearby. I felt really, really bad, but they had told me it was okay and we were fine. But how was it fine when the car almost got towed? My table neighbors were also shocked because they didn't know that there was a time limit for the loading dock. I then realized later the constant buzzing that was on my phone was the convention messaging me. Lesson learned. Just park in the garage and walk stuff there to avoid a tow truck's jump scare. Oh boy. So after that ordeal, a bit later after my nerves had settled down, we bumped into a staff member that my sister immediately recognized from one of our trips to another con. Not one that I vended, because again, this is the first time that I've vended at a convention, but one that we had gone to on a trip. It was Magma, who was the MC for the masquerade held at Fanime. It was pretty cool to meet him, and he even gave us a ribbon for recognizing him. I do want to add that the convention that I've ended at was Anime Los Angeles, and at this con, they have a tradition where attendees can collect ribbons in various ways. In a way, it's almost like a small game. The attendees apparently try to get their ribbon chain on their lanyards as long as possible before the end of the con. Some people do trades, some get their ribbons through funny actions like doing a dance, or through purchase. I also heard some ribbons are apparently more rare than others. Either way, it was really cool to get my first ribbon. Also, I had finished up my table setup, and here's a picture of how it came out. What do you guys think? Since the setup was all completed, we bid farewell to my table neighbors and walked through the alley back to the car, seeing and meeting a few artists along the way, some which my sister recognized, and some which I thought had pretty cool art. They asked me if this was my first time here, and I told them yes, which they were very shocked, and I would be too. But they wished me luck, and likewise I did the same to them. After that, we had driven back to our inn to check in and relax a little bit before going out to dinner. We were both starving as we had not eaten a proper lunch during setup, so we went to a place that we had agreed to go to for dinner that we saw when we were leaving for the inn. Overall, it was a pretty good day, even with the tow truck jump scare. Day 1, thankfully, was a little bit easier. Getting up was a bit of a struggle, but I did eventually get up. We had gotten coffee and then headed over to the convention center. I then went to go over and pick up my stamp rally cards and help my rally mates set up their table, plus distribute the rewards. We decided to make one of us be the end table, as originally we were going to have the rewards split up, but it made more sense to have an end table. I talked to my table neighbors that were sitting right next to me as we finished the last minute setup, and we all began wishing each other luck as we finalized things. The night before, I had gotten the idea to make some funny tip jars. It was just basically little koroks where you could choose mercy or no mercy. It was just something to spark conversations. A few announcements went off as we were still setting up, and once it hit 10 a.m., the doors opened and the attendees just started walking on in. I had heard from some people that Thursday was going to be really slow, but I'll be quite honest, it didn't feel like that to me. I had gotten a few sales literally at the start of the con and made just almost a quarter of my table back, which really shocked me. Someone had come up to my table and bought a whole set of prints I had worked on, plus an extra of another character too. It kind of shocked me because I would normally be the type to do that on the final day. Later, I took a step away from my booth to meet a few artists that I heard were coming. One that I didn't expect to meet was another streamer named Cyberpunk, and it was really cool to meet them. I got a Rowlet print because Rowlet is best boy, and I wished them luck, and he did the same for me. I was really shocked at how well my prints and stickers were selling. I made sure to keep track of every single purchase, as that is important to do so when you're running an event, so that way you know how much stock you have left. And suddenly I realized, day 1, I was very close to paying off my table. On the very first day. I don't know if other convention artists can agree with me, but I think that paying off the table on the first day speaks a lot. I had heard that Thursday was slow, but some staff that came up to talk to me told me that this was the busiest Thursday they had seen at a con. However, they did say Saturday traditionally was the busiest, and Friday too, but this was an odd one. But I think that I can honestly say that I know why it was the busiest. During this time, a fire was happening in the LA area. A few times we were given a warning on evacuations. The con room was filled with a warning noise going off from everyone's phones, telling us that there might be a chance of evacuation. But thankfully though, that after some time, another alarm went off and the entire con just cheered. I checked and we were given the clear to stay, which meant the con wasn't going to be cancelled. I did make a few more sales and soon the first day was done. I also had gotten a few ribbons too, and guys, when I say the ribbon culture here was strong, I meant it was strong. Here's a picture of my ribbon chain for day 1. That's a lot of ribbons. And I was just at my table mostly. Day 2 was similar. We got up early and got some coffee, making it to the convention center before most of the other people had gotten there. Now remember when I said I had some ribbons you could get for purchase? Well, I soon realized setting very specific rules didn't really help, especially considering they were so specific that people just wanted to buy the ribbons. So my sister decided to switch it up a bit. We decided to change it so if you spent a specific amount, you could then pick what ribbon you wanted. Or if you wanted to, you could try your hand at trivia, with questions related to each ribbon's fandom. If we ran out of questions, then you had to buy it. And that actually did wonders for us. I had gotten quite a few ribbons for the con, so I definitely needed to get them out. And let's just say this, that once I announced it in the Discord for the convention, people started lining up to get ribbons. It was crazy. Later, once it had calmed down, I wandered around meeting some artists and talking with them, asking how it was going. Some said it was pretty slow, others said it was pretty fast. But we couldn't give it definitive as it was just day 2, which was the medium day as people would call it. And again, I had heard on day 1 that it would ramp up on day 3 and 4. When I had gotten back to my booth, I had learned that someone wanted me to sign their prints, and going to be quite honest, that shocked me, as I never expected for such a thing to happen. But it did. They came back to my table as my sister had told them that I was wandering, and after signing their prints, I gave them a free ribbon as a thank you too. Then one thing happened to me that I had been worrying about. An attendee asked me if I took commissions, and that wasn't the thing I was worrying about. While at the time my commissions were closed, I told them to scan the QR code on the back of my card. And this is where the problem lies. They told me this. Your QR code is busted. Now, QR codes, if you know, are the best because it means you don't have to put a ton of text on the back of your card. My original cards had so much of it that I opted to use a QR code this time. But thankfully, I put my website link at the bottom, so I told them to use that link instead. It still felt really silly because for the rest of the con, I had to use this line where whenever anyone would get a card, I would say this in the best sales pitch voice I could. Thank you for grabbing a card, though small note, my QR code is busted, so please use the link at the bottom to find all my other links. Legit became the most used line I had ever said in the entire con, and my table neighbors kinda teased me a little bit for it. Eventually I got enough sales to pay off the hotel that me and my sister were staying at for the entire con, and for this is what they call breaking even, because that meant that day 3 and day 4 was just gonna be pure profit. I honestly didn't think I would get to that point, but I did. Which made me really happy because this was my first con and it was really great to see how I was doing. So with the first 2 days being a success, it was now on to the busiest day, day 3. And as people had said, it was definitely the busiest day. People would come to our booth to do trivia, but they also wanted to have extra ribbons, so they decided to do trivia and then buy art to get more ribbons. It was a bit of a blur as this was the busiest day. When I asked my sister if she remembered anything, she also admitted that she had trouble because we were so busy at our booth, people kept coming up and getting things. But the one thing I do remember is this. My sister had brought her shadow plush that I got her for Christmas and made a makeshift lanyard for him. Since she was very obsessed with Sonic at the time, every time she got a Sonic-themed ribbon, she would put it on her Shadow plushie, which then attendees would come back later to see how many ribbons Shadow had collected. It was really cute to see. And I underestimated my sister's Shadow obsession, as when there were slow periods for her or I to walk away, with one of us staying at the table, she'd come back with so much Shadow merch. The dedication there. Overall, I was really happy that we could have some fun at the con. I was really worried because it was a very busy con. I didn't know if we were gonna have a chance to walk away from the table to do some things for ourselves. But I think that because there was 2 of us, it made it a bit easier. I had made some merch for a fandom that I really like called Murder Drones. I definitely recommend watching it. It's really cool, though it can be dark at sometimes, but overall it's pretty cool. I've been hoping to see some cosplayers of it. During the first 2 days, I had heard there were some meetup for the cosplayers, but I hadn't seen any. I did, however, have someone come up to the booth with the coolest eat-a-bag I'd ever seen. It was full of end charms and being a character from Murder Drones, and even signed by the voice actor Michael Kovac as well. Honestly, it makes me hope one day I can get an eat-a-bag for myself and fill it with all of my favorite characters. To all you eat-a-bag owners who have your bags filled with your favorite characters, you guys are my inspiration. And speaking of cosplayers, Later, an N cosplayer showed up in my booth, and oh my gosh, his cosplay was so cool. There was also another Murder Drone cosplayer that came to the table as well, and I decided to take some photos. A bit later, the N cosplayer came back and asked me if he would like to guide me to the meetup. I then got to meet 2 more cosplayers there. They were basically the main characters of Murder Drones. We took photos of the cosplayers, and it was so much fun to see them all posing and acting out little scenes together. I wish I could do cosplay, but I get so nervous. I have to eventually, though. Now about this con, before we get to the last day. I will just say this again, this was my first ever convention experience for tabling. However, this convention just felt really well organized. The staff, whenever they passed by my table, asked how I was doing and checked in on all of the artists to see if we need anything. The attendees were also really nice, and even with the ribbon game going on, they respected the rules for those of us that had ribbons at our booth. When they asked, "Do you do trades?" and we told them no, they thankfully respected that, or bought something from our table to get the ribbon, which I was really grateful that they respected the rules. This con had also been compared to as a mini anime expo, but it didn't feel like it was packed in like sardines, and people knew when to move so other attendees could see other artists' booth, which is a big win because oftentimes a table would be so crowded that you couldn't see the booth, which can happen at cons sometimes. I've been there. And the con announcements also kept on letting attendees know when the hall was going to close, which helped us artists as well, so we knew when to get ready to close up on time. Overall, it was just really well organized. The day soon ended, and I just felt the biggest joy in my heart. It felt very different tabling at a con. Yes, I've done streaming, but tabling at a con and getting to meet people in person just felt like the most magical experience I've ever had in my life. Finally, on day 4, the last day, I decided to make the choice to wander around the vendor hall. I had been staying at my table for most of the con, and my sister told me that it was good for me to wander around and that they could handle the table, so I decided to just do that. A few people had stopped by and gifted us some ribbons, which added to the ribbon train. I swear people at this con are so freaking nice and cool. However, the one thing that I saw before I left my table was a person who had stitched together so many ribbons that they literally made a dress out of it. Yes, a dress. Any leftover ribbons that they couldn't put on the dress, they decided to give out. And I will be honest, it was super cool to see that. It was really cool. People are just so creative with ribbons. I don't know what to say, but you guys are cool. Now here is the best moment that lives on in my head rent-free and will until the end of time for this convention. I left to go meet a voice actor as my sister had said that she could handle the booth while I was gone. But I don't think that she was able to handle the sheer dedication of this one person who came to the booth. This is how she worded it. This attendee who was carrying 3 big bags of merch beelined it from one end of the aisle to our booth and immediately said this to her. "I need 1 of every Murder Drone item you have." Now for the record, I had made 4 prints and 8 stickers for this. So that's kind of a lot. My sister pulled out the items, calculated, telling them the amount, which kinda shocked her as well, but the attendee simply stated the best line, as I said before, that will live in my head, rent-free, and a token memory of this con. "Money is not the problem. I need Murder Drones." Dedication there! And I would have done the same thing too if I was in their position. When you have a fandom that is what is called niche, and you find material about that fandom, you are dead set to get it. And remember, when people purchase from the booth, they get a ribbon. They went well over the amount so they could get multiple. You would think that they would want different ones, right? No. They only wanted Murder Drones. They got 10. Holy crow. And this all happened while I was away from the table. This happened multiple times, but why does all the cool stuff happen when I step away from the table? I did wander around and buy some things from other artists, wanting to talk with them and seeing how things are going. And finally, in the last bit of the con, when it ended, I heard the most beautiful thing ever. The entire artist alley and vendor hall all cheered as we completed the 4 days. It was just really cool. This entire experience, I will admit, I was nervous, especially this being my first time tabling, and this was a relatively big con as well. However, I can honestly say this. If I could, I would love to table at it again. The energy there was amazing, plus the ribbon game was really fun. I got to make a ton of friends, which was something I was also worried about. There was and still is a lot that I could have improved in preparation for this con, but for the first time, I feel like I did pretty good. I paid off my table, my hotel, and other costs too. But most importantly, out of anything, I had fun doing it. There may be more convention stories in the future, but for now, I just want to relax. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to subscribe as it does help out the channel. I do want to tell more stories of adventures like this one. And if you want to see the art drawing live before it becomes speed paint, I'd say check out my Twitch. Anyways, see you on the next adventure. I'm gonna go pass out and draw my OCs. Alright, bye!